Let me say this, hypothetically speaking, I really do hope that we have a woman president in my lifetime, and whether it's next time or the next time after that, it really depends on women stepping up and subjecting themselves to the political process. Then the country, our country, has to take that leap of faith.
Not the first, probably won't be the last hint from Hillary Clinton. Big week in politics, both leaving and coming up. Let's get to that with our roundtable. Starting out from the Congress, Republican Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, Democrat Joaquín Castro from Texas, Amity Shlaes, director of the Economic Initiative, the George W. Bush Institute, and author of Coolidge, and financier Steve Rattner, former counselor to the Obama Treasury Department, and ABC's chief business and economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis. Welcome to all of you. A lot to talk about. I want to begin with immigration because it seems like we had kind of a tale of two worlds in Washington this week. A lot of progress in the Senate on immigration. It appears that they're set up for a vote tomorrow that could lead to an overwhelming majority, but things seem to be getting bogged down, continue to get bogged down in the House. And I want to start with you, Congressman Castro. If indeed the Senate is able to pass this immigration bill with the 70 votes that some Democrats are saying is possible, does that mean you can get it through the House?
Well, it's certainly a precondition. It's got to pass with strong momentum in the Senate to have a chance in the House. Nothing really original, I think, is going to originate in the House of Representatives. So that's really a precondition. If it does that, I actually think it has a good chance. I still believe that we can pass it in 2013.
But your colleagues, many of your colleagues, Congressman Kelly, seem to think that the 70 votes doesn't make a difference one way or the other. The House is going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah, and I think if you look through history, we don't do big things very well in Washington. So I think it's better to break it apart, do smaller pieces, have a heavy debate about it. And I'm not talking about a conversation. I'm talking about a heavy debate. This is a serious, serious issue. We talk about a sovereign nation and its ability to protect its borders. That's number one. If we didn't learn anything from 1986 up until now, it's that we've got to look at this carefully and go through it. I don't understand the rush. We saw what happened in Patient Protection, Affordable Care Act. Anytime you rush anything through that big, this was up to 1,100 pages. I doubt that anybody's really read it and been able to really get through every piece of it. But border security is still a huge issue in Northwest Pennsylvania.
Even with this $30 billion new dollars being put into border security?
Well, you know what? And I would point out, George, that the border is more secure now than it's ever been. For example, in 2004, there were 10,000 Border Patrol agents along the border. Now there are 21,000. The amendment in the Senate, the Corker Amendment, would take that to 40,000 Border Patrol agents. The number of crossings with Mexico is at net zero now, the migration with Mexico. So if there's any time to do it, it's now.
The CBO took a look at this week, and they put out a report that has a little something in it for everyone.
Congressional Budget Office.
Yes, the Congressional Budget Office took a look at this week, and they found that there's going to be deficit reduction, net savings $175 billion, and that it would help aid growth, 3.3% more GDP growth over the next decade. But for opponents of the bill, there was also something in it for them because it showed a very minor downtick in average wages and also a minor uptick in the near term in the unemployment rate.
How does that play out, Amity?
On balance, the growth is more important. The uptick is so minor vis-a-vis the wages. And what's very exciting about these reports is they do dynamic analysis, a more sophisticated form of analysis that shows how much growth we're going to get. I think generally with immigration, we get bogged down in the law part and forget that whether we have new border guards or not, probably this will be good for the economy if we settle on immigration and routinize it. At the George Bush Center, we have a book about immigrants and growth, a whole book that shows almost all the time they help, and even with jobs.
You've written, going all the way back to Coolidge in your book about Coolidge, that this is a debate that the Republican Party has always struggled with.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the Republican Party can be sour. And that's one of the sour parts of Calvin Coolidge was he didn't always appreciate immigrants. But what he did appreciate was once they were here, the whole process of Americanization, they said, or becoming part of America, whatever words we would use now. He said whether we came over on the Mayflower, George, or in steerage just a few years ago, we're all in the same boat here. And what I emphasize in that book, and indeed in this conversation, is that immigrants make the economy stronger. That's the number one, it's there, it's true.
There's no question. I think every mainstream economist agrees that as an economic matter, immigration is a positive for this country. Obviously, it was built on immigration. As Rebecca and Amity pointed out, this issue about it pressing down on wages has been studied and is viewed to be a minor effect, if at all. So the opposition to immigration reform is really more of a social and a political issue. It shouldn't, and I don't believe it is really an economic issue.
And one of the things we saw, Congressman Kelly, this week, you talk about breaking it up, is that there was a big debate on the Farm Bill this week in Congress as well. And you had a coalition of some conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats bringing the bill down. A lot of people looked at that and said it means that Speaker Boehner's going to have a hard time getting anything through the Congress on immigration. And he said this week that he's not going to do it. And do you believe him? Do you take him at his word that he's not going to do it unless a majority of Republicans support the legislation?
Yeah, and I do. But I got to tell you, from my experience, I've only been there one term and part of a second term now. I've never met anybody that's more open to the debate on the floor than Speaker Boehner. He has really been a champion of having an open floor, let everybody talk. The Ag Bill is a good example. This is something we should have been able to get done. And in the past, we were always able to get done. Now, we went through a very lengthy process, heavy debate process, heavy amendment process. I was disappointed that it didn't go through. It wasn't strong enough to the right for some of my colleagues and wasn't strong enough for the left for some other folks. And I don't understand that because at the end of the day, the idea was to put something forward that gave certainty for the next 5 years as to where we were going. It's the uncertainty that's driving all the problems in the country right now.
Do you think the bill passes if Speaker Boehner insists on only bringing it to the floor with a majority of Republicans?
If the Speaker insists on using the Hastert rule, which essentially says that you've got to have the support of a majority of the majority, which means a majority of Republicans, that means that 25% of the body can control 100% of the agenda and the legislation. It will not pass if he uses the Hastert rule.
I want to move on to the economy this week. It was a big week. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke came out and gave his outlook for the next year or so on the economy. Here's part of what he said.
Generally speaking, financial conditions are improving. The main drag or the main headwind to growth this year is, as you know, is the federal fiscal policy. You know, given that very heavy headwind, the fact that the economy is still moving ahead at least a moderate pace is indicative that the underlying factors are improving.
But Rebecca Jarvis, the Fed chairman emphasized mostly good news.
Mostly good news.
Qualified good news, but boy, Wall Street didn't like it one bit. You saw a 500-point drop in 2 days.
And this is the irony, that Wall Street has become dependent on the Federal Reserve and its economic stimulus program. They've been pumping $85 billion into the markets, the overall economy, for more than 4 years now on a month-to-month basis. And those trillions of dollars, some on Wall Street are calling them a Hotel California because you can check out, but you can't necessarily leave. You can never leave.
And Steve, you know, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times rarely agree on things, but they both use the word addiction to describe the Wall Street's reaction to this quantitative easing, these funds that the Fed has been putting out. Even when the Fed chairman said, listen, I'm not necessarily saying it's all going away, you still see this negative reaction.
I think there's two important points. The first point is that what Ben Bernanke did, I believe, saved the economy. You can call it by a lot of funny names or crack cocaine and all this stuff, but the fact is the economy was collapsing in 2008. He took important steps, and I think they were critical to the economic recovery. So I believe that this was a positive program, one we needed. Secondly, what Wall Street is also worried about is the fact that when you take the training wheels off the bicycle, it's not clear the bicycle keeps going. They are worried about the future of the economy. We still have 7.5 or 6% unemployment. We still have slow growth. And frankly, most importantly, we still have a Congress that is basically doing nothing. We have a Congress that has passed fewer laws, the last one, than any Congress, including President Truman's do-nothing Congress. And as important as immigration and guns and climate and all these issues are, the American people say the economy is the most important issue, and yet Congress is doing nothing on the economy.
Coolidge would say fewer laws is good. I want to mention that. You know, one of the things concerning Wall Street is that there's not enough growth to power the bicycle. If we're sticking to the bicycle metaphor, it's the absence of fiscal freedom that's there. Even Chairman Bernanke alluded to it. He said it's a fiscal drug. So why is he our hero? Why are we listening to him?
Chairman Bernanke actually said the opposite. Chairman Bernanke said that the fact that the federal budget deficit has been coming down has been restraining growth and causing the economy to grow more slowly than it otherwise would.
So if they were spending more and more, the economy would be better?
That was his point.
Yeah, well,
yes,
okay.
that's exactly his point.
I'll disagree with him. If this is the situation that we're expecting the federal government, led by the Fed or by Congress, to power the economy when the economy needs to be ready to power itself. So it's an inconvenient moment to take off training wheels or to cut off the IV of the drug to which the economy is addicted. But it's got to happen eventually.
One of the points he was making, Congressman, is to pick up on is the sequester is having some impact as well. Do you see any prospect at all in the next several months that Congress is going to loosen this sequester?
I mean, I'm hopeful, George, but honestly, it's very difficult with this Congress. The sequester was never supposed to happen. The Budget Control Act of 2011, super committee that was set up was supposed to solve it. Obviously, that didn't happen, and it will have a negative impact on our economy. But I would point out that, despite the fit of Wall Street, we've got to remember that over the last few years, Wall Street has done a lot better than the average American, so they're still doing pretty well.
And before you came to Congress, Congressman, you were a car dealer. What do you feel? What are you feeling out there right now?
Well, I'll tell you what. I feel frustration. We're talking about the economy. You look at the economy. Look at the potential that's there. Look at the squandered opportunities that we've had so far. Now we keep going back to, well, Congress didn't do this or Congress didn't do that. If we had a really aggressive energy strategy, if we had a way to go ahead and lift people out of where they are right now, when you see the middle-income people have lost $5,000 a year in income, you say, why is that? In a country that has been so blessed for so long, the only thing missing right now is strong leadership and a strategy that improves the economy. I don't want to talk about...
So what would an aggressive energy strategy be? Because the president's about to make a major announcement this week on climate change and energy. So I want to know first your view on what that would be.
Well, first of all, I don't know that the president needs to make a statement on green energy. I'll tell you what, with all the other things, a list of priorities of what's going on in the world, if this is really his initiative, I think there's a lot more things on his plate right now. To me, it's a pivot away from what's causing the distrust of this government. And I don't care any relationship that you have, whether it's you and I, you and your wife, any of us in a business relationship, when we lose trust in that person, then we don't have any faith in the future. And that's where we are right now. So I think the president would be better to talk about lifting the lower income people and the middle income people and let them get to where they should be. Excellent opportunities right now.
I think he's going to be making the argument this is part of it. So let's look ahead to what the president is going to do this week. Yesterday, he put out a YouTube video announcing that he's going to be making a major speech on climate change and energy on Tuesday. Here it is.
In my inaugural address, I pledged that America would respond to the growing threat of climate change for the sake of our children and future generations. This is a serious challenge, but it's one uniquely suited to America's strengths. There's no single step that can reverse the effects of climate change. But when it comes to the world we leave our children, we owe it to them to do what we can.
And Stephen Rattner, it appears that this is going to be the president's attempt to move around the Congress. He's going to use executive action, we're hearing, to have the EPA limit greenhouse gases from power plants, raise new efficiency standards, and have more renewable energy on public lands. Can it be effective?
Well, with all due respect to the congressman, I think the president has an energy policy. I think he stated it. It's an all of the above policy, and what he's going to say on Tuesday is a part of it. And I think it can have an effect. The Supreme Court has given him the authority to regulate greenhouse gases, as you say, and he has a bunch of other authorities. And remember one other thing. There's a decision coming on the Keystone XL pipeline shortly, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is all part of a packaging effort by the White House. You've got something for the people who care very intensely about the environment. You've got something for people who care intensely about more energy
the Keystone
supply.
pipeline.
I think it feels like there's a package coming.
And the business world's reaction to this move?
It's very mixed, George, because you have on the one side businesses that would certainly benefit from this in the alternative energy, the green energy space, and then you also have the businesses that are going to probably have to increase their spending in order to meet these new standards. But the UN just put out a report about the food business in particular, and that the food business, in light of some of the changes in our climate, has actually had to move around and move to new locations, and they've had to spend money in order to make up for crazy weather patterns.
What unites us this morning is that the people are talking about the economy. This is an area where what the president is saying is probably anti-growth. It might hurt coal, which is an important part of our economy, provides a lot of electricity. It suggests he should have more regulatory power. Regulation, not laws, is often what's dampening growth in the energy sector. So which do we care about more? There is an element of trade-off, isn't there? Do we want a higher GDP and more labor force participation, or do we want us to be about laws? Do we, regulating a moral idea, global warming, a moral idea, in other sectors, in immigration, enforcing our borders, or do we want the growth? That's the unity.
Life is about trade-offs, and there's no question that economically there is some trade-off between the environmental issues that Rebecca was talking about as well as the economy, which you're talking about, and you have to find a balance. And I think the time has come for the president to find that balance. I don't think he's not violating the law. He has the legal authority, and he's going to use it. And this is the kind of leadership that Congressman Kelly is asking for.
Well, and I do think that you can move towards alternative and green energies and still be successful and keep things efficient. In San Antonio, we closed 2 coal power plants down about 12 years early and moved over to natural gas and alternative energies, and we still have among the lowest rates in the country.
Congressman Kelly, I think Speaker Boehner said this week that implementing these new rules that the president did, it would be absolutely crazy. But is there anything you all in the Congress can do to stop him if that's what you choose to do?
I don't think, I don't know what we can do to stop it. I would say this. The president talks about all the above, but then he leaves out everything that's below. We have tremendous and abundant, accessible, and affordable way of producing energy in this country. We do not have to rely on anybody from outside our borders to supply us with a barrel of oil. We can do everything that we need to do right here. The other things we have, George, we have tillable soil and potable water. Not the rest of the world has all the things that we have. So when you don't have to rely on other people for these things to get by, when you can lower your cost of energy, you can then compete in a global economy that allows us not just to be part of it, but to dominate it. I just don't understand why. The president's role should be as a uniter and as a guy who leads us forward. We can't constantly have this divisiveness. We also have a great opportunity with nuclear. So my question is, so why are we concentrating on some of these other things and not using what's abundant, what's accessible, and what's affordable right now?
I'm not sure what it is that you're referring to that's abundant and accessible. Are you talking about coal, or what are you talking about?
I'm talking about every one of the fossil fuels. I tell you, in Pennsylvania, 40%. No, we're not. Steve, we're not. We're shutting down coal plants. We're shutting down electric-powered coal-powered electric plants.
We are trying to reduce our reliance on coal because of the adverse economic effect. We now have an enormous surplus of natural gas, which will take its place on a very cost-effective, environmentally more sound basis. We have had an enormous increase in our oil production in this country, the fastest increase I think we've had in history, in a reduction in our oil imports. So I'm not sure what it is that you want the president to do that we're not doing.
Let's be really honest about this. All of the growth has taken place in the private sector, not the public sector. The president was dropped in his lap an opportunity. Yes, of course I do. But I also know there's a great potential in the public sector. There is an answer to every one of our problems. That is the dynamic and robust economy. And any other talk is just idle chatter.
I wish we had a lot more time for real talk, not idle chatter, but we're out of time right now. Thank you all very much. Rebecca Jarvis, sticking around to answer your questions for our Web Extra. Check it out at abcnews.com/thisweek.